You asked me if when I was younger, if any of those YouTubers or if I, for whatever reason, personally had um, any feeling or any inclination that I possibly could have been trans or anything like that. And I'll be honest with you, I will say it did cross my mind at one point.
She was running around naked near the pool in Florida, right? The way I do wish I knew about Jeffrey and James before my transition, before my sex reassignment surgery, that would have given me some options to be like, oh, hey, there's like gay men that live full time, you know,
Right.
wearing much makeup, cross dressing, wearing wigs, just being hyper femme.
Very simply, you fell into an echo chamber, and unfortunately, that echo chamber had medicalization as an option.
And by the way, the left is always saying kids are not getting the surgeries. You can look up Kim Petras got her surgery at 16. It's almost easier for them to do sex work when they can make thousands of dollars, when they can get famous through porn and amass hundreds of thousands of Twitter followers after just, you know, making a few porn videos, right?
Out of all the ways that you can come out, having somebody blackmail you is pretty scary, you know?
Flashing her titties on the front lawn of the house, like, because one of the videos definitely influenced me because she did go to Dr. Spiegel. He is used to be a very famous facial feminization surgeon in Massachusetts, and I live in Massachusetts. And I remember after seeing that video, I did go to have surgery with him possibly. You know, I went for a consult, and it is kind of demeaning when you pay somebody $250 to tell you that pretty much you're ugly and he can fix you for like $50,000.
The legend, Dr. Siegel.
And guess what? People have died over the years. Trans women have died and committed, some of them self-cancellation.
That this is actually serious. Like, this is end of life stuff for me.
It's normalized as an option, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because instead of normalizing something like that, like you said, we should be having influencers that are talking about, you know, pushing trans people to be doctors and to be engineers and things like that, and we have the opposite. We have literally de-influencers. We have people who suck at what they're doing. They're terrible influencers.
It's Shapeshifter, your favorite grifter, and I have a very special guest on my channel. Daniel, welcome.
Thank you. I feel like this was in the making for a few days already. We've been talking in the DMs for a little bit.
Yeah, we have. I came across your channel, which is Cancelled Conversations, and I instantly fell in love with your style of content creation and editing. I thought you were funny and smart.
Thank
I
you.
instantly reached out to you, followed you on Instagram. We started talking right off the bat and had an amazing chemistry. And I thought I would have you on my channel. I instantly started talking to you and realized we have a lot in common. You said that you're from Cuba, right? And
I
that
am. I was born there.
your family immigrated when
Mm-hmm.
you were a kid.
Very,
And
very young.
can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so I was born in Cuba in 2002. And excuse the pimple, I put a pimple patch on it. We already talked about this, but just so that people know, I came here when I was about a year and a half years old. I was a very, very young kid. So I have had pretty much most of my life here in America, which is why I think that I have so many, I identify really largely with being like a Cuban American, and it influences pretty much all of the things that I talk about on my channel because I kind of steer towards political stuff, and then it's called canceled conversations because I talk about things that people would get canceled for. And it's influenced pretty much every single topic that I talk about because most of the, and I'm sure that you already know this if you don't already, most of the woke and gender ideology crew is basically just like uh, literally just a modern version of Marxism. And Marxism being hugely what influenced the change in policies and government in Cuba, I have a very strong opinion on communism and the fact that it really pretty much just is communist propaganda. Where I come from influences a lot of what I talk about.
Um, and when you told me you were only 21, I was shook because you're so well articulate. I'm not saying that 21-year-olds
I
can
get
be
what you're
articulate
saying.
or intelligent,
I've
but
been getting it my whole life. I've been getting
nowadays,
it my whole life.
yeah, nowadays 21-year-olds are like more like 15-year-olds.
Mhm.
Due to brain worm and TikTok and social media, people are just, it seems like, I think there've been
Mhm.
actual some studies showing that it takes people longer to mature
Mhm.
nowadays than before. In a way, I feel like the safety and certain comforts of modern society kind of slowed down the natural maturation
Mhm.
that humans were supposed to go through back in older days when people had to survive
Yep.
sooner. There were more dangers. People had to forage for food and look out for protection against, I don't know, saber-toothed tigers.
Yep, exactly. Saber-toothed tigers, big ass spiders. Instead, people are kind of just everything is very emotional based these days, and that's part of the problem. I always talk about on my channel how we have a big mental health epidemic in this country, and it's more important to give government dollars towards mental health than pretty much anything else right now.
Yeah, and so how did you get interested in the trans subject and the trans subject? How did you become like Blaire White fan, for example, and went
Mhm.
into like defending her with the whole Blossom situation? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I've been a fan of Blaire White probably for as long as I can remember. It's been years at this point. I've been a fan probably since maybe like 2017, 2016. It's been quite a long time. I found out about her because me, just like everybody else, used to be a big fan of Shane Dawson. And she had done a video with Shane Dawson. And I started watching her channel from then. And I started watching her channel because she would always get attacked for being a conservative and for her opinions on the trans community. And I always was very confused by the fact that she was attacked for her opinions on the trans community because she is trans. It's almost like when we talked about this briefly the other day, but it's almost like when you leave Cuba, the first thing that people do if you leave, they call you a worm. It's called a gusano. They call you a worm. And that basically means that you left, so you're a worm, you're rotten, you're disgusting. And it's interesting to me seeing the juxtaposition between the way that those people make a line of differentiation between a communist and not a communist, and then we're all Cuban, but somehow I'm like disgusting because I left because I don't want to die of starvation. And it's the same thing with Blaire. You get attacked for having your own opinion and being your own person, even though you're trans and you should be allowed to have your own opinion, especially in this country. And seeing that and all the things that she would go through with other people pretty much started my dive into the trans community. But it wasn't until I had my own experience with a trans person where it woke me up one day and I actually what they call a red pill, and I actually went down the path of looking more into it, and it's quite the story.
Speaking of Blair, I mean, during the recent Jubilee debates that you reacted to, Blossom and others accused Blair that, she's not grassroots and whatnot.
Surrounded
In
by them.
services in terms of nonprofits
Sir,
and actually
she's a
getting
trans person.
clientele.
She's not
and
That's my
actually-
entire
She is not a grassroots
not
person
grassroots.
because
But I think, unlike some other trans creators, Blair managed to survive and thrive on YouTube for a long time. Like almost how many years? A decade? 8 years? Something insane
Yeah.
like
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 8 years, I think. 8 years. I think I talked about it in my video on her. She has over, I think, like 250 million views, all combined on her channel, which is insane. I mean, it's
wow.
wild. Yeah, it's more than like, I mean, if you cut that out through each video, that's more than network television gets here in the US. That's I would say that's pretty influential, wouldn't you?
For sure, yeah. And like you mentioned in your video, it was surprising that none of the major news outlet ever platformed her, including Fox News.
Blaire White has been on YouTube for 8 years. She has never been on network television, nor has she ever been appreciated or highlighted for being a sane voice in the transgender community. She's a conservative, and while the likes of Caitlyn Jenner have been invited onto Fox News, Blaire has not, even though, arguably, she's one of the biggest trans voices in YouTube for years. On the contrary, Blossom, the person speaking at her, has been invited to the White House. She's been gifted things by Ellen. She's been on Caitlyn Jenner's infamous show. She's been a commentator for CNN and has spoken and represented the Human Rights Campaign. She quite literally has been invited, celebrated, and highlighted at places Blaire is not allowed.
Even though she identifies as a conservative, right? And she holds conservative values, I feel like she has faced discrimination from her own kind for being trans, and that's kind of sad. I think she appeared on Sky News Australia, which is like a conservative outlet in Australia, but our own American outlets such as Fox News have not platformed her, even though I'm pretty sure they have platformed people like Candace Owen, like other
Yep.
token minorities, so to say. And I hope Blair doesn't take offense to that, but sometimes, the
Yeah, for sure.
minority.
She was on the Piers Morgan show, and believe it or not, I don't know if you're aware, but when she was on the Piers Morgan show, they had her on to talk about obesity. So she didn't even talk about being transgender. It was about, they had her on to talk about obesity. So even then, there was still no mention or no highlight or any conversation in regards to the transness. It was pretty much merely about obesity, which, yes, Blair's talked about that before, but not much. So it was kind of useless. And like I said, even then, it wasn't even about her being trans.
It's funny because I was recently on a debate that I got invited to on Twitch where I was debating a trans woman, and it was moderated by a big YouTuber. Um, and it was strange because one of the prompts was obesity. What do we think about fat activists? And I found it a little strange. I mean, I can see a little bit because usually people who defend, fat influencers and all that are very like left wing, super woke. But then, yeah, so it's like it's a separate animal, but I don't know why. I think there is some overlap, like in terms of body dysmorphia and that, but again, it's another subject. Let's talk about this. Bring us to a main subject that we want to talk about, which is
Okay.
kind of like rise and fall of OG trans influencers, and some of them survived um in a tranosphere and some of them did not.
Yeah.
And
There's a
yes.
few. Like, I think that the first person that we have that we want to talk about is Gigi.
Mhm.
And Gigi is interesting because she actually didn't post for a long time. Even when she was big, she wouldn't post very often. And so randomly she stopped posting on her channel. But recently, I actually found out that just about, I think 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, she actually started posting again. But it's really interesting, and you can kind of um, talk about this even more, go into depth on this. But it's really interesting how back then, we're going to talk about other people who pretty much did the same thing, but back then when these YouTubers were popping and they were big, most of their content was based off of their transition. It was based off of, you know, whether it be like get ready with me's or things like that that were about bikinis and kind of showing off the body, and it was very centered around being trans. But now, including Gigi, all of a sudden it seems like nobody is really touching that topic with a 10-foot pole. It seems like everybody's talking about beauty.
And Gigi has a lot of subscribers. I would
Mm-hmm.
say she is probably as a trans YouTuber with the biggest subscriber base, 2.72 million subscribers. And if
Yeah.
you look at her recent videos, her last video from 4 days ago only has 24K. If we divide 24 by 2.72, that's a very tiny engagement.
Mhm.
Her most successful recent video is We Made Babies, which let's talk about it because Gigi is an interesting case, right? She talk about a grift. Like I get called grifter a lot, right? But I think earlier trans YouTubers they had first mover advantage. It's like in business when you discover a new niche market or a new product that hasn't been
Right.
created before, you get a first mover advantage. So it hasn't really been done before as much, you know. So you have your unique customer base, you have this opportunity. And I
Right.
think Gigi was like one of the first transfluencers. And because of that, she got book deals, show deals, and she got one of the, I would say, biggest prizes when it comes to financial success is marrying into money because she
Mhm.
ended up marrying one of the Gettys. And mind you, I'm not the one to decide if Gigi married for money and fame or not, but she was a gay boy, and then after transition, she was dating a lesbian pretty much.
Yep.
A lesbian woman, right? But one thing I feel like this is a good moment just to mention is that a lot of detransitioners and transitioners have mentioned how their sexuality has been changed because of hormone intake. So
Hmm.
there's a possibility that her sexuality has changed for sure. But the hypocrisy for me comes in a place. So yeah, I guess I do believe that she lucked out in a way because maybe she doesn't need to put out as much content. She got married into the money,
Yeah,
literally, right?
absolutely.
Yeah, and but that being said, Gigi Gorgeous has inspired a whole generation of people to transition, including myself, a lot of feminine gay boys to transition, and a lot of those gay boys, they did probably end up getting bottom surgery like me. She wasn't the only one who inspired me. I'll talk more about the second transfluencer that influenced me into getting bottom surgery as well, and believing that I was in a wrong body. But Gigi
Right.
Gorgeous was a big one. And now she's trying to have children, her own biological children with her partner. And I think her last videos that I haven't watched says they made babies. I don't know if it's clickbait or they were actual successful making babies with their sperm and eggs, whatever they have. But not a lot of people who looked up to Gigi are that lucky, right? Because some of them went on puberty blockers, some of them got bottom surgery,
Yeah.
and
There's been quite a few. And I will say it's something that plagues a huge part of our community because you had asked me this while we were kind of setting up for this video and I didn't really answer too much because I wanted to discuss it right now, but you asked me if when I was younger, if any of those YouTubers or if I, for whatever reason, personally had um any feeling or any inclination that I possibly could have been trans or anything like that. And you know, I'll be honest with you, I will say it did cross my mind at one point, very, very, very early on, just because of the fact that growing up, I was the more feminine kid and I was taunted for being feminine. And so when I was in school, people would call me a girl. And so it wasn't that I took that and kind of like sucked it in. I was like, oh, I'm a girl. It was more so that they made me think that there was something wrong with me. And so when I found out that gay people existed and then I found out that trans people existed, automatically your brain is like, what's that? I'm curious about that. And you question it. And it was something that I did question, but I immediately shot down when I simply was like, well, I like having a penis, and so it was a pretty simple choice for me. I was like, I thought about it for a second, and I was like, you know what? Let me actually think about this. And then I actually sat with myself in my room, and I was like, well, could this be a thing? And I was like, no, I like having a penis, and that was that. So once I came to the association of I like having a penis, I never really questioned it. Now there is something very interesting about me personally because I am very spiritual and I do believe in things like past lives and things like that. And so whenever I mention this to people, they laugh or they say, "Oh, whatever, you're talking shit." But I've always felt always that I have a very powerful uh dominant like a very like royal kind of figure, like I call it like a queen type thing that is in me internally that I recognize as possibly being a past life because I recognize a strong um feminine nature in me. but I wouldn't transition because I know that I'm a man. But there's something in me, and this is something that whenever for example, I go on a date with a guy. I actually went on a little date with a guy like maybe a month ago, and one of the first things that he told me was, "Wow, you have such a beautiful feminine energy." And it's like that was the first time that I had ever met him. He had known nothing about me, nothing about any of that stuff. So even then, it's almost one of those things where it kind of pushed me to question it, but I didn't question it past I appreciate my genitals and that's it. And that was pretty much where I closed things.
This is a really good point because all of us have feminine and masculine energy outside of, our biological sex. And it's okay to be a feminine man. It's
Hmm.
okay to have that feminine energy in a biological male or masculine energy in a biological female. And spirituality and that concept, I wish I came upon sooner in my life. Because then I would have also interpreted the messages the way you did, right? And
Absolutely.
I used to also love my penis, but I think when I took estrogen, I got way more diluted. And I'm glad like you escaped. You quickly were firm in your identity. But a lot of young impressionable people are not that
Hmm.
smart or not that they're more vulnerable, and not
Especially
everybody.
now. Especially now.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree that it's a little bit, I would say, easier to kind of go through flipping the coin of your gender? I think it's a little easier now than it was maybe 15, 20 years ago. I would say it's a little easier now, especially with the fact that most kids, especially from that Jubilee debate that Blaire was on, from that Jubilee debate, they talked about the fact that for the most part, by the time that they left the doctor's office, they were already on hormones.
Wasn't
I
tested
didn't
for my
have to see a
levels.
therapist first.
No.
I had no letter.
And you were a child.
I was a
That's
child.
crazy.
I was
So,
15
and
years
that
old.
is a very,
In
very
one of the most
common.
conservative states in the country. So if that's what's going on
Wow.
in Georgia,
Damn.
Wow.
imagine what's going on everywhere else.
California, hello.
Yeah, when I went for my initial appointment, I literally helped my doctor find gender dysphoria on his chart and mark it for me.
That's insane.
And I walked out with my prescription
And-
that day.
And that's insane because one of the things that I think is most important about, and you can disagree with me, of course, one of the things that I think is important about affirming trans people is understanding the mental health side of things, because a lot of people are truly struggling with a mental issue. And yes, the argument can be made that being transgender is a mental condition, and I am one of those people where I can understand why you would think that, because it does partially affect the mind. um and because of that reason, because it falls under something medically mental, like it is something that is medically, it has to be assessed not by going to just a doctor. It should be assessed by first going to a therapist.
But
And I
we
don't know if you would
can,
agree with that.
yeah, I agree with the fact that this is a very serious situation, but unfortunately, the gatekeeping has been lowered so low that pretty much anything at this point falls under trans umbrella. And I think activists purposely lowered barriers to entry to trans identity so they have more allies, more people to support the cause. But also, by lowering the safeguards, they made it more dangerous for people who have other issues that could be producing similar effects as gender dysphoria,
Mhm.
could get easily medicalized. People who just maybe want to express themselves in a different way could get confused and think they are trans. I mean, you experienced momentarily gender dysphoria, you questioned your gender, but you desisted, thank God, and you didn't medicalize your thoughts. But some people who are more dysphoric, unhappy in lives, they could see that as a solution. And
Yeah.
sometimes these influencers, especially in the past, had huge audience and huge influence on masses and masses of people.
Yeah.
Um,
Some of them still do. Some of them still do. I mean, some people like Nikita is one of those people who she quite literally she's one of those people that takes advantage of dipping her toe in and out of the YouTube community. But when she does come back, she usually always finds a way to catch some buzz or some sort of attention. And I was looking through her channel earlier, and it didn't seem like even when she was actually actively posting, it kind of honestly, it did seem like she did survive the curse of, talking only about her transition, because for the most part, I think towards the beginning her content was trans centered, but at least towards the end, it was more so clickbait videos, videos about makeup, things like that, her makeup line. But you actually wanted to talk about the whole thing with her makeup and the shades that she had and the way that she kind of did make transition part of her collaboration with Morphe, right?
Yes, I did have her palette, and which I forgot to grab from upstairs, but let me look up colors because I'm sure the names of the shades are available on Google. But one of them definitely was HRT. I'm sorry, I completely forgot about it. Yeah, but
It's okay.
her
I'll edit
collab
it in.
centered around them. So the pictures here don't have their names, but yeah, so her palette was definitely centered around her transition, and the little note included the description of her trans journey and all that. But I found that palette at Marshalls, along with some other products that were not that great. Her eyeliner was not that great, and I say that as a makeup connoisseur that does have a lot of makeup.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe that the reason she was actually, you know what? It's not Gigi Gorgeous. Nikita has, wait a minute. Nikita has how many subscribers? Because I just saw it.
Wait, she has
Like,
more than Gigi?
yeah, I think so. Wait a second. Yes, she has 3.46 million.
Oh, okay. So a little more.
Yeah, it's definitely more. It helped her because she was at some point friends with, Gabriel Zamora and Manny Muye and part of that clique. Jeffree Star before it all blew up, remember in Dramageddon? Once they posted a picture without Jeffree and flipped him in the picture, which just blew into huge drama. But she was also able for years to escape all the drama by not reacting to it and not addressing it. She's been accused of blackfishing. She was accused of like race swapping and whatnot, being transracial secretly.
Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
that
she really tried it with that one.
remembers that drama?
Yeah, she really tried it with that one. She said it was bronzer or something. Right.
No, the
Right.
picture was edited to make her skin color look a few shades darker.
Right. For sure. For
Like
sure.
a few shades darker, like really close to
Quite a few.
being
Quite a few.
transracial.
Yeah.
I
Quite a
think
few.
all in London had nothing on her in that moment.
No, he actually had nothing on her at that point. It wasn't until after.
So Nikita has been engaged in a lot of problematic behavior, but somehow she managed to escape all those cancellations.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, she was involved in boyfriend drama where allegedly,
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that.
yes,
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because most of them were able to, at least the ones that tried, like Jeffree Star, most of them were able to go ahead and avoid all of those controversies simply by not talking about them, which is definitely one way to do that. When somebody criticizes you for something as big, I think that's definitely one way to do that. But it's just interesting how, at least for her, nobody really talks about her anymore. But it's interesting how whenever she decides to come back, people talk about her. Gigi did a whole comeback. Gigi Gorgeous did a whole comeback, I think, again, like maybe 2 weeks ago. And her videos aren't even hitting like 100K. And she used to be huge. So it's interesting how for some reason she gets a lot of attention, even though she is so controversial. I don't really think Gigi is that controversial. I don't really remember any sort of controversies that she's been in, to be honest.
she's just a stereotypical, OG trans activist that kind of, promoted transgender identity to masses, kind of raised awareness about what trans is to like a main public, and she did what she did, and she got a marriage out of it. I'm sure she's all set financially. She's been getting a lot more plastic surgeries over the years, Gigi Gorgeous specifically, which at what point are those surgeries medically necessary, and
They're
life-saving?
not. They're not. That's the thing. They're not. It's like when people talk about the fact that that's actually funny that you say that during that Jubilee debate when the non-binary when the non-binary was like, well, transition is similar to when women want to go ahead and get their breasts done when it's not the same thing. Again, it's not medically necessary. So,
Sex parts.
But what is your
You can have
dysphoria?
dysphoria
What is
about
your
anything.
dysphoria?
Straight cis women have dysphoria about their breasts all the time. They get breast augmentation.
not dysphoria.
That doesn't mean that I'm not dysphoric about certain things.
But Nikita, I think, was also part of Hype House, right? And she was a bunch of other projects. And then she even tried to have her own like show on Snapchat at some point that
Yeah.
looked super fake on stage. Remember? She was
Yeah,
going
and it
out on
failed.
days that literally look like super fake paid actors.
And it failed. And it failed. I don't know. It seems like most of the things that she's a part of don't really last too long because nobody really talks about her makeup anymore. In fact, I think she did like 2 makeup launches and then never did anything again. So that was more so a Morphe collaboration than her own makeup brand.
Yeah, it never. I think she kind of started a little bit late because Laura is a leech and Manny Mooch and all these people already had their palettes out. And she was like one of the, like, she kind of missed that train when it was like really big influencer brands were popping. She was a little bit behind. I don't know what it was. I kind of have an idea because I do feel genuinely bad for Nikita because she has opened on her channel about being bipolar and somebody who had trans experience and being part of the trans community. I've noticed with a lot of trans identified individuals, they oftentimes do have trauma, sometimes other comorbidities. And in case of Nikita, she has opened up about being bipolar. As somebody who has taken estrogen, it definitely made me dull. It made me less creative, less motivated. So I can see like why it didn't work out as much for Nikita because as biological men, testosterone is part of our drive. It's more than our sex drive, right? So we can see how James Charles and Jeffrey are kind of striving in a way, right? With their makeup. I mean, I can like James, yes, he had controversy about talking to minors and all that,
Pretty
but
big one. Pretty
he's
big
still
one.
he's still finding a way to keep on making money and moving along, right? Same with Jeffrey. He's been canceled so many times. He's still like getting away with everything, and now he's like with Eugenia, doesn't care, promoting his palette, in a way. But we have to give it, at least to Jeffrey. We both agreed off camera that he has a good makeup. I have a few Jeffrey palettes, and I'm not setting them on fire because of Eugenia controversy, because I already paid for them. So already resources went into making them. I might as well gonna use them. I would not purchase any more products from Jeffrey, but I already have them, right? And I think there's something to be said about creativity of gay men that is fueled by our natural testosterone. And I've mentioned it multiple times. I feel a little bit like my wings have been clipped, with surgery, with estrogen. And I have my own serum, Nikita, and we've seen her go to jail, right? We've seen her blow kisses to the judge when judge was telling her, that she can go whatever. So that's not a normal behavior, right?
Right.
We can tell that this person, like, she was running around naked near the pool in Florida, right?
Yeah,
So
but we also, and just to kind of push back on what you're saying a little bit, we also have to be very aware over the very real influence that fame has on people, and especially somebody like her who had the build to have a collaboration with a big brand, somebody like her who was at a very high height of her career. Fame is a very, very addictive drug, and seeing how it has eroded her as a person, it's not too far of a link to make that, maybe part of what she is doing and part of what she has done, a lot of it could be attention seeking, because of the fact that when you figure out, at least for the type of work that we do, when you figure out that being controversial or saying things that go against the grain, or the way that you speak, or right, so the way that you act, kind of dictates your content. Sometimes a lot of those people, when they've already pushed the envelope, they're like, how can I push it even farther? Well, I can go to jail and I can blow kisses at the judge because I know that immediately I'm going to become a social media meme and people are going to use that pretty much forever. So in one way or another, my notoriety is still going to exist even if nobody watches my videos. And that's a real big part of the conversation.
yeah, I totally agree with you that fame does change people, fame and money. But I think in case of Nikita, we also have to probably look up the timeline when she started OnlyFans, because sex
Okay.
work and OnlyFans, a lot of people have spoken out how it negatively affected their mental health. And I can only imagine having a failed brand, maybe that left her with debt, seeing her other people in her clique prosper and keep on keeping on while she kind of faded in the background might have affected her mental health in a negative way as well.
Mm-hmm. That's a fair point.
I do agree that in social media, the more controversial you are, it definitely helps. And I kind of learned about all of those people through Rich Lux, to be honest. I kind of like learned them from like original drama channels that were like at the time doing really well on YouTube,
Right.
such as Rich Lux, Karina Kaboom, John Cookian. I kind of found out about all those influencers through them. I actually didn't know about Jeffree Star up until 2016, to be honest.
Oh, wow.
I
Okay.
saw, yeah, I knew his like I saw his dupes being sold on eBay before I even knew who Jeffree Star was. I'm like, why is there all this like fake makeup on eBay? Who is Jeffree Star? Yeah, because I kind of missed, in a way I do wish I knew about Jeffree and James before my transition, before my sex reassignment surgery. That would have given me some options to be like, oh, hey, there's like gay men that live full time, wearing
Right.
much makeup, cross dressing, wearing wigs, just being hyper femme. I didn't know about Jeffree Star up until 2000. I don't know how it happened, but I didn't know about him.
Well,
I,
I can easily explain to you how it happened. To be honest with you, this is a conversation that people are having a lot more now because it's becoming a lot more prevalent for everybody. But the conversation of living in an echo chamber, maybe that was the situation. Maybe you were living in an echo chamber. You were living in you kind of put yourself in a bubble, or you fell into a bubble. It sounds like it's better said, because it wasn't just you personally that influenced the decisions that you made. You also had other individuals with medical licenses who also influenced the path that you took. So realistically speaking, it's very simple to fall into an echo chamber, especially right now. I mean, how many men do we see that are just normal men, and then all of a sudden they have a podcast where they're talking about how women are slaves? Like, we see so many of these men who randomly get podcasts out of nowhere and start talking about how women suck and women need to make sandwiches, and people like Andrew Tate become famous. Like, how does that happen? In the same way that it's very simple to fall into an echo chamber, and then the difference between the echo chamber that they were in is the fact that there was no medicalization to their echo chamber. It was purely psychological. It was purely political. It was purely philosophical. It wasn't something that you medically had to get affirmed. So how did you fall into that? Very simply, you fell into an echo chamber, and unfortunately, that echo chamber had medicalization as an option.
yeah, definitely. And I do, now that we're having this conversation, timeline wise, it turns out that I was following I was stuck in a tranosphere pretty much. I knew about
Yeah.
Gigi Gorgeous and Princess Jules, which is another creator that we'll get into, but before I knew Jimmy Charles and Jeffree Star, And I wish I discovered Jeffree Star sooner, but also I didn't grow up really in this country, and I know Jeffree was big back in MySpace days, and I was not on MySpace. And I know he brought a lot of his following from MySpace.
Well, I was 21, so I was definitely not on MySpace. I found out about him through the music. I was not on MySpace. I wasn't even old enough to have Facebook, so
Yeah, I did not know about his music career till later, because I knew he had Beauty Killer palette, and I didn't know he had a song called, or album called Beauty Killer. Yeah, his music was not that great when I looked it up. It was just like a gay club. He was ahead of his times. He put out hits like average drag queens from Drag Race put out now, but for his time, it was revolutionary. I mean,
Right.
he's putting out what now a lot of TikTokers and YouTubers putting out, ones that have like a custom
That's a fair point.
base. So he was doing a lot of things before people did it,
But I mean, give him some credit. I mean, he has a song with Nicki Minaj. I don't know if you know that.
God, I did not
Yeah,
know.
he has a song with Nicki Minaj, so that's a pretty big deal.
But before we go further, I just wanted to tie back a little bit to your previous point and just wrap up a couple of things. I think
Yeah.
there's a deeper societal issue, like you mentioned, with Andrew Tate. Nowadays, social media wise and money wise, bad behavior, problematic behavior is sometimes rewarded. And that's what people are seeing, they're seeing Andrew Tate like you can go say radical extreme shit and go viral and
Yeah.
start making money of your videos, right? And we see all this like what are they called 300 or whatever go on these different podcasts
Right.
like whatever and go viral for just saying random like bullshit. Like,
Right.
oh, I start OnlyFans to honor my grandfather. Like, there's no way somebody is that dumb to say it unless you're trying to go viral.
You want to do OnlyFans to honor your grandfather's legacy?
Not in that way.
Was he
it's more
like a corn star or something?
No, it's kind of like
What kind of content do you make on OF? Is it boy, girl, solo?
Just me.
Just you?
Just me.
Okay. Full nudity?
No.
But you do have an intention to, down the road, do nude.
Maybe in the future.
You mentioned that you don't want to bring shame on your family. Do you think it might possibly bring shame on them to do nude stuff?
I don't think so. If I go deep down into my mom's opinion about it, she might be open to it. She's a really cool mom, so.
Would you?
To honor your grandfather, what was your grandfather a pimp?
Yeah, it's like makes no sense. And people clip those little, parts of, those podcasts and they go viral. It also sounds like negative message to young boys, thinking that all women are like that,
Right.
And it's just like there's just deeper issue and society should stop rewarding this like bad behavior. Society should stop rewarding people putting silicone in their ass, and doing all those risky things to their body to look like cartoonized versions of themselves. Well, let's face it, even what's her name? Kim Petras.
Kim Petras. Yeah, but at least she has some connections in the industry. He was just some random guy on MySpace. That's a pretty big deal. But yes, she does.
I was just
She does. The girl that sings Unholy with whatever that Sam Smith person is, whatever demonic thing is going on there.
Honestly, her song with Nicki Minaj was unholy, like because it was just so basic. It looked like it was made by AI. I felt like I've heard like 20 other songs that sound like that. It just seemed like it was quickly made together. There was no creativity put into it or music video.
Well, it is a sample, so she did use the instrumental from a different song.
Oh, really? Because it sounded so generic.
That's why it sounds familiar, because there's a song that she sampled for that. But yeah, I totally get what you're saying. It's very like bubblegum pop, like what you would expect when you hear a pop song. I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
I feel like Sam Smith carried an unholy song. She was just an add-on because they're under the same umbrella, I guess, according to far left.
I would not disagree with you. I'm not a big fan of Sam Smith as a person, but I will say sometimes he makes some good music.
Yeah, unholy, it's definitely a brain worm,
Yeah, it's hard to get it out of your head.
It is, yeah. And Sam Smith, he's not castrated, so he has his full force, like testosterone, gay male energy. Like he created, and gay males, we cannot deny. I mean, throughout the history, gay males have created some amazing fashion, some amazing makeup looks, some amazing art,
I mean, we gave y'all theater. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Back to, Kim Petras, she's also one of the first mover advantage situation because let's face it, I mean, Kim, she can hold a tune, but when it comes to her timbre of her voice, her songs, they're not that special. I mean, yes, she does slut pop, which is good for like gay scene, drag scene. It works, it sells. She has a famous producer that I believe also worked with Kesha.
Dr. Luke.
I think so, and
Hitmaker. Hitmaker. That is the guy that you go to when you want to make a hit. He's also apparently, allegedly, I'm not trying to get sued, allegedly a rapist, but allegedly.
Yeah, the whole Kesha situation.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess the question we have to ask, would she still get that deal? Has she not already been famous for being former trans kid who got a sex reassignment surgery at 16? And by the way, as the left is always saying, kids are not getting the surgeries. You can look up Kim Petras got her surgery at 16.
Yeah, yeah, and I remember. I don't remember. She wasn't as big when I found her, but when I found her, which was quite a few years ago, she was doing if anybody who's listening knows, is a fan of her, she was doing, and I will input it in, she was doing pictures that had like little colors behind them, and it was like an era of her music, and that was very, very early in her career, and that's when I found out about her. And back then, when I was looking up videos about her, because I was like, who is this person? I didn't find out until later that she was transgender, but I found out, and you can see how she was medicalized very, 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 very young. And I know because when I found her, she still had a German accent. She's from Germany. She still had a German accent when I first found her. And now she talks more like an American.
I feel like maybe for a I mean, I'm not saying Kim is not talented, like she is. I just don't see her as a standout on a level, you know, to be having songs with Sam Smith and Nicki Minaj if it wasn't for her initial possible boost from notoriety for transitioning as one of the youngest people to transition. Because in a very competitive environment, when it comes to artists nowadays, it's easier for producers to produce stars that already have some kind of traction for whatever reason, right?
Right.
So my personal series, she would have not been here where she is today had it not been for a trans situation as well. Yes, she had some hit songs, but it also a lot of it is luck and good producers that know how to write a hit, that are willing to take you on under the label. Anyways,
Yeah,
back to
I agree.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Anything else?
No, I agree. I was just gonna say that I agree with you in the sense that I don't think that she's untalented. I do definitely think that she has talent, but I do think that there was a very big signal boost in the society that we live in. Our gender and if we transition, and our sexuality are both very important because they're seen as objects that people can make money off of. So just look at it now when we have like diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in careers and schools now where they actually have to pick somebody of said gender, said color, said minority on purpose because they'll know that if they do that, the government will give them more money because they are, I don't know, following some sort of ethical program of including more people. And so even then, people are making money off of their sexuality, their whatever. And in that sense, if we're looking at it from the lens of Kim Petras, why wouldn't somebody have an extra signal boost from being the only trans pop star? You know what I mean? She's literally the only one that exists that's that big. So, of course, for sure, it's impossible to not argue that part of the reason why she's famous is because she is transgender. Now, I don't think that's the only reason, and I think that at this point we can both agree that after having a song with Sam Smith and Nicki Minaj, it's hard for you not to have some sort of fame, but it's definitely part of the reason why she got famous for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. One thing I also don't like about the whole like competitive situation is because her slut pop kind of plays into that stereotype. I guess I'm no longer a part of really trans community as the trans, but I think it does harm to trans community where a lot of trans women are sexualized already and seen most of the time as just like object of a fetish to sexualize, and that slut pop is really not helping trans community or, you know, even gay and drag communities that is also known for being hypersexual and full of sex workers and people who are just like sex obsessed, histrionic personality, like times 100.
And what do you say to people like Blossom who have to say that part of the trans community is to do sex work? What do you have to say about that?
The thing is, though, even when we talk about prostitutes, trans women have to sometimes participate in sex work to survive.
But they base it off cis prostitutes.
Well, that leads me to the point that my series, like, from what I've heard, I'm not gonna name people, but I've talked to one person who kind of did live YouTube in a way, to do sex work because there's just a lot of money in sex work for trans women, given how like this whole thing blew up and people hear it all the time, and sometimes even people who publicly hate and shame trans people secretly jerk off to them or book them to see them as escorts or watch trans porn, and that all creates huge demand. And sometimes those people who this person I will not name because it's their story to tell, but you know, it's hard to make money off YouTube when you have to be creative, you have to come up with a concept, you have to cut down the videos, you have to edit, you have to stay relevant,
Right.
Something
Absolutely.
we know, for example, not many people were able to do over the years is stay relevant and produce content that people want to click on. And it's almost easier for them to do sex work when they can make thousands of dollars, when they can get famous through porn and amass hundreds of thousands of Twitter followers after just, making a few porn videos, right? Which is way harder to do through mainstream. So I think that also it's hard today as trans women for a lot of trans women because they're getting fetishized, they're being treated as experiments. A lot of them have mentalities that like, why bother dating when I'm just gonna sell my time,
Right. And let's be honest. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if this means anything to you, but I think it's also interesting that we live in a society where if you're gay or if you're transgender, and I can't imagine, this is why I bring it up because you mentioned how hard it is with the stereotypes and all the things that you have to follow based off of being trans. Isn't it interesting how we are the LGBT community is one of the few groups where people are okay with telling small children that if you are not careful, if you don't do things by the book, if you don't this, if you don't that, somebody is going to bash on you because of who you are. Isn't it interesting how one of the first things that we tell children when we're trying to accept them for who they are is you have to be careful because people are going to hate you. I feel like that's damaging to people because it kind of sets up something in somebody's head already that they're a minority and that that's one of the reasons why people end up being leftists is because they're told you're a minority and because you are black you are never going to get anything, and because you are transgender, like Blossom said in that debate, you're going to die by the time that you're 35. So this is why this and this happens, and that's why either people end up being activists or people end up being scared their whole life that they're going to get bashed on for who they are.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that back to, sex work, it just seems to be very much accepted in trans community, and also like younger trans women and trans men, who are their role models, right? On social media, either makeup gurus, beauty influencers, or OnlyFanners, right? They don't seem to have that many options. We're not really seeing like trans women mathematicians or scientists.
And that's why I mentioned it. That's why I mentioned that about them usually end up kind of telling those same kids, instead of influencing them to be a doctor, the first trans doctor, instead of influencing them to, I don't know, be the first really famous trans scientist, instead they all decide that they want to be leftist activists, and they end up being the ones who end up telling children, hey, if you end up being a trans woman, you're going to die by the time that you're 35.
There's also, speaking of the numbers that come out of LGBT activist organizations, there was a little number that the life expectancy of a trans woman was 35. That was rescinded a couple years ago after like over a decade of that being like just factually, shared. And I always thought that my life was statistically going to end at 35. So, but those numbers were based on, by those organizations, prostitute deaths. So it's not always the most reputable numbers they're getting, you know what I mean? And these activist organizations are political too. We get caught up in calling them activists and we think it's this emotional, spiritual thing, but they are political organizations.
Yeah. And they perpetuate that idea that a lot of like, for example, what Blossom said in the debate, they perpetuate the idea that in order for you to be a trans woman, some people end up having to go through sex work, because of the fact that that's just what trans women go through. And that's what I'm saying, in the sense that the people that are influencing them are basically just telling them that, at some point by the time that you're 35, you're going to die. And unfortunately, that is the influencer that they have. The influencer that they have is a bad influencer.
Yeah, and honestly, like as much as people hate on Blaire, she's one of few trans women who hasn't done OnlyFans, right? She at least has that example that like, hey, you can still make it by, like Buck was saying on Blossom, using your mouse, but in a different way.
Yeah, I saw that. That was funny. I saw that. That was funny.
I too get to be in spaces that a lot of them don't get to be in. And so I feel like I have a responsibility.
But how did you get to that space?
I got to that space because of my mouth,
That's
Because of your mouse. Oh my god, that could be misinterpreted.
right. How did I get to this space?
Oh my god! And when you were talking about the fact that they got there with their mouth, that was funny too.
Blessings for
Girl,
using her mouse.
that's funny.
Yeah. Anyways, but I think we just need more examples in LGBT community of people that are, doing something else just to give like younger people who are watching all these people on like social media
Mm-hmm.
better examples other than just being victim. But speaking of people having to do sex work, I wonder how many of these people are brainwashed that they need all these surgeries as soon as possible or they're going to kill themselves, so they fall into things that they wouldn't do normally to try to transition as soon as possible or come up with money for better surgeon. I was just reacting to a trans woman from New Zealand who got her bottom surgery, had complications, and now she has hernia. She had a 6-figure job, and now she was working as decorator for homes that are to be sold, right? So now she can't lift up heavy things, and she may have to turn to sex work to fix her hernia because in New Zealand, surgeries are not covered, and even though right now it could be medically urgent surgery such as fixing hernia caused by colon vaginoplasty, because it was caused by elective surgery, she might have to go to Canada and she has to come up with money, so she might have to turn to sex work to fix all the surgeries that are a result of, in my opinion, medical and necessary surgery.
Right.
So she went from having like a legitimate job to pretty much like doing OnlyFans, and now she may have to, like she said in her own video, to be on her back to pay for now at this point actual life-saving surgery because hernia is very serious. Like
Right. Absolutely.
Which I didn't think anything of. I was like, oh, well, whatever. That's, minor. They can just repair that. It's not. It is super serious, like serious stuff, having a hernia, because a hernia is literally your intestines coming out of your stomach into the skin area. And I've got a big one. If I've got a hernia, it is, I don't think people get that this is actually serious. Like, this is end of life stuff for me. I've got many years ahead of me and I can't work now. I am disabled.
Yeah, if you rupture a hernia, that's not good at all.
And also maybe all the young people that are being transitioned right now, they're like gonna end up being part of the community where being an OnlyFanner and busting it open for others to see for $5.99 a month is normalized,
Yeah. And the sad part about that is that it's normalized, but it's normalized to what extent? Because out of all of these people, we see them pushing the envelope with every video, don't we? Every single time that they do a video, once they start off with teasing. They start off with taking the pictures with the bikinis. They start off with taking revealing photos. And then once people start not really caring as much, that's when they start being a little bit more revealing, a little bit more revealing. And then a lot of those people end up going into fetish videos. They end up actually fetishizing themselves for money. And unfortunately, we live in a culture where that is it's normalized as an option, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because instead of normalizing something like that, like you said, we should be having influencers that are talking about, pushing trans people to be doctors and to be engineers and things like that, and we have the opposite. We have literally de-influencers. We have people who suck at what they're doing. They're terrible influencers. And that's funny that we talk about that because it leads into somebody who somehow has found a way to survive by neither being political and neither talking about being trans, because out of all of the people that we talk about, Nikki Tutorials, Beauty Guru, is one of the only people who seems to have survived the bubble of either being extremely political or talking about being trans. And you have a theory behind that.
Yeah, Nikki Tutorials is an outlier to me because she's an interesting case.
Yeah, I would agree.
Do you want to talk more about that? Because she was known. I knew about Nikki Tutorials before she came out as trans, right? I assume it was the same for you, right? Remember that video where she came out? It went viral.
Yeah, and that's part of the interesting thing about her. People finding out about the fact that she was transgender, because from the video that she talked about, She found out that she was we found out that she was transgender because somebody was going to expose her. They had blackmail on her about her transition, and they found out, I guess, I don't know, I don't think she talked about how they found out, but they found out that she was transgender and they were going to blackmail her, or they were basically going to leak that information. And so she did make a video saying, I am transgender. But it's interesting that she had the opportunity to build a career for 8-9 years before people even knew. So it's like by the time that people found out, maybe even people that, let's say, weren't very open to trans people, which is, I would assume, very hard because she is very obviously a leftist. I would assume that it's very difficult to follow her if you are not very leftist leaning. But once they found out, it was like, even if they didn't like her or they didn't like trans people, they were still going to support her because they had been supporting her for what, 10 years almost. So no matter what happened to her, she was going to be successful. And that's pretty much, I would say that's why she's an outlier.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for Nikki in that sense because she never used a trans card to become successful. She pure relied on her talent, and right, we have to give her that. That's something we can't say about a lot of people, right? And to be fair, as much as we both love Blaire and all that, we have to admit that being trans and being in that, right-wing circles kind of gave her an edge, right? Made her unique in that sense.
Right.
If it was just random white straight guys saying the same talking points, it would have never went viral. People would have not been paying attention as much, right? We have to admit that. With Nikki Tutorials, she's not like traditionally beautiful, right? She's plus size and whatnot. That's not something usually rewarded in society. So she purely got viral based solely on her makeup talent. But she is very talented. And when she did come out, I was gagged because I thought she was going to come out as lesbian or something like that. And that again destroys radical narrative because you probably don't know that, but some radical people follow me, and they subscribe to ideas that you can always tell who is trans and who is not. But I couldn't tell that Nikki was trans. I don't think Jeffrey was able to tell. When I found out about Nikki when I had that video on doing my makeup in Rolls Royce video, remember that? You might have seen that where Jeffrey
I do. That's the whole heart drama.
Yeah, they were doing makeup in the Rolls Royce, and Jeffrey even stuck out his head, and he was like, "Ooh, it's so summery out. Are you into transgender realness?"
It's so summery out.
Hi, guys.
Hi. Are you into transgender realness?
And then Nikki was laughing, and I believe that in that moment, Jeffrey did not even know that the person who was sitting next to him was trans.
I don't think so, because people usually don't make jokes like that unless they're very comfortable with somebody. And even if they're comfortable on camera, that would not fly. So yeah, I don't think he did. That's a good point. I don't think he did. You just reminded me of that.
I think that moment then should have went viral because it's like, hi, it's so summery out. Hey, are you into transgender realness?
I think that clip did go viral when she finally kind of came out. And it's kind of, I don't know, I feel like if out of all the ways that you can come out, having somebody blackmail you is pretty scary, because it's like, there's a reason I feel like why she didn't say anything, like I think even she probably understands the fact that you're going to get a lot of backlash from both sides of the coin, because it's like, even if she would have been trans and come out as trans, like those people that are in far left, clubs, I guess you can say, usually push people that are part of a minority to speak on social issues. So I don't know that she would have wanted people to know about that.
Yeah, and I feel like in that coming out video, I remember her saying that she always wanted her channel to be about makeup, and I respect that. There's also a lot of talk about what is true trans, because it seems like that's where the narrative is shifting. And I've never spoken out of it, nor am I going to give my opinion in general, but I feel like if true trans was a thing, I think Nikki would probably be considered true trans because she was so dysphoric about trans things that she never wanted to talk about it. She just wanted to live her life and her life to be about other aspects of her life, We do have a lot of other people who definitely have made every penny possible out of their trans identity and trans journey. But again, Nikki Tutorial, I believe like age-wise, I think she was part of original Dutch protocol, which is now canceled and closed down. But that would trigger like medicalization of gender nonconformity in kids. And I wish Nikki came forward and spoke about her experience, you know, being on she's one of the, I guess, oldest former trans kids because she's in her 30s, but time wise, she must have been, and she's from Netherlands. That's where it all started. Dutch protocol. That's when they started giving puberty blockers to children, and now it's shut down. And a lot of Western countries such as Sweden and Finland, they also backtracked on transitioning minors and now only confined those transitions to research purposes. But in US, they're still transitioning minors, and but I don't think Nikki would ever speak about it, you know, because that's not her brand, right? She never speaks about it. We don't know if her surgeries were successful, but I guess she is super passable since nobody was clocking it. And I just want to say that I talked about Nikki once, and I remember whether it was on Twitter or on YouTube, I saw one comment where this woman was saying how upset she was when she found out that Nikki was trans, how she felt lied to and cheated because she followed Nikki for years and she followed all her makeup tips and learned so much from her. But when she found out Nikki was trans, she felt like she's been lied to. And I felt like that would be a good example of actual transphobia. What do
Yeah.
you think?
Well, I try not to label things like transphobia, homophobia, racism. I try not to. What I would call that is a pure, easy example of somebody just being very, very ignorant and stupid. Because to me, in my opinion, the only person that should have known that she was transgender was the person that she's sleeping with. The only person who should have actually known that she was transgender was the person that she was sleeping with, and obviously her family had to have known. But out of all the people that were required to know that would be a betrayal if you didn't tell them, would be the person that you were sleeping with. But I would assume that after being with them for so many years, they would know that. So what I would really call that is very ignorant. And I would say that that person most likely at this point, after it's been quite a few years, they most likely regret saying that because the climate has changed quite a bit. I don't know that, especially the way that the internet is now, I don't know that people are really speaking that way anymore because they are afraid to get canceled.
Well,
But I would call it ignorance.
It happened recently because I was tweeting about Nikki, just kind of.
Oh, okay, recently.
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying I have some radical following. Well, I guess you're
Wow.
right. I wouldn't call it transphobia because phobia is irrational fear, and I think this person is afraid of Nikki. But I just felt like it was weird, you know, if you feel
Yeah,
like
but very
Nikki.
ignorant, very stupid.
Yeah, but also it's funny is that Nikki didn't feel comfortable just leaking out, and she kept it secret till the last moment, even though she was an industry that is full of, you know, gay people, boys in makeup, and all kinds of people, right? That even in that industry, she felt like it would work against her. And I just want to bring to the point, yes, there's a lot of like people who are always in victim mentality, like Blossom. I hate to bring her out, but I think she's fresh in our memories. That's why. But discrimination does exist for sure based on, you know, somebody's gender expression. And people, specifically gay people who have historically been, a lot of them gender nonconforming, absolutely have experienced discrimination based on their
Right.
gender expression or what they wear and their sexuality. To sit here and be like discrimination never happened and everybody's 100% equal and taken just for their talents and skills, that would be BS too, right? It's absolutely
Right, yeah.
happened. It doesn't happen every single instance Blossom thinks that happens.
Right. Yeah, I wouldn't say like I can honestly wholeheartedly 100% agree with you on that. Um I would say that we don't have what Blossom basically is pointing towards, and what she pointed towards in that video and every video that she makes, She said it herself. You are not on the front line.
She's a trans person.
She's not
That's my
grassroots.
entire
She is
career.
not a grassroots
Not
person because truth be told, a lot of our
What does that
community
even mean?
is in grassroots.
Trans people in my
Trans-led
life, yes.
organizations that are ran by trans people. I really want to see what you've done for those organizations because I don't see any of y'all on the front line.
I'm on
The front line, like
fighting
what are you
against the-
talking about?
I'm
I've
on the front
dedicated,
line.
hold on. I've dedicated my entire life.
You are not grassroots. Front lines, when you talk about front lines, that means you're talking about a war. That means people are getting shot. So when you're talking about front lines, that means we're talking about a huge civil rights issue where we need to have another civil rights act and we need to have another Martin Luther King. Like when you're talking about that, that's when we can have a conversation about it being a real issue where discrimination is taking over our country. But when we're talking about discrimination being somebody, you know, misgendering you accidentally at Starbucks, when you're calling yourself a woman and you have a full beard, you're dressed like Bob the Builder, and you have a full construction hat on, I mean, sir, like, sir, please take your macchiato and get the fuck out of the facility. Like, let's be real here.
Speaking of frontline, you know, grassroots activists, and let's talk about the front lawn of the White House and and as a trans activist. Remember that? We did not forget that.
I did not forget. I did a whole video on that one. That was interesting.
Hi, Rose Mutoya. We did not forget. We did not forget the shining example of trans activists that are grassroots.
Right in front of Joe Biden. Right in front of Joe Biden and Jill. And Jill.
Not forget that.
Right in front of Joe and Joe.
Can we take a little video? Hi, Mr. President. It is an honor. Trans rights are human rights.
Are we topless at the White House?
We did not forget the moment when trans joy was a little too much, you know?
Just a little. Just a little.
When trans joy took over and things went a little too far.
Yep, and somebody took their breasts out in the White House.
And I mean, Rose Montoya, I mean, is that what we have? Like Rose Montoya and Blossom, is that what people are supposed to look up to? I mean, like I said, I just feel like Blossom thinks that she's doing an amazing job, that she won that debate, but I feel like she probably inspired people into detransition, which is good to my side of things. People like, you know what, we don't want to be trans. If Rose Montoya and Blossom are example of trans women that are supposed to be the good ones, who wants to be trans? Like Rose Montoya is not tucking, showing off her bulge, flashing her titties on the front lawn of the house. Like, what? Doing fundraiser for BBL. I think the last I checked on her website after she went viral, she was doing fundraiser to get Brazilian butt lift in Florida. So I'm like, is this
essential surgeries? Essential surgeries.
Yeah, and I think she raised a few $100s for her bigger butt, and it was medically necessary in her head, right, to get bigger butts for her.
Well, she was probably hoping to shake it off at the White House. I mean, what else can we expect?
Oh my god. And yeah, talk about somebody as dysphoric as Nikki Tutorials, who literally lived as stealth as possible and just wanted to live her life and do makeup, versus Rose Montoya, who is just shaking her bulge and shaking her titties at all the wrong places. And it's like, yeah.
Yeah, I think the problem with her is that she was invited into a facility where people expected her to show up and show out. They expected her to appear a certain way, and she appeared, but not in that way. She appeared, but not in the way that people were expecting her to appear. And I think the problem with that is that, you know, if we're having a conversation of her being at, like, I don't know, some sort of White House fundraiser, and it was like not in front of the president, and it was just a cute little White House fundraiser or whatever. No, but she was invited where the president was going to speak. Her little TikTok video that she posted, Joe Biden was in that. And it's like, everybody can have their opinions on Joe Biden. Trust me, I have many, but he is still the president of the United States. You don't do that in front of the president of the United States. You don't do that. Like, that's a big no-no, and that's the reason why she was banned from the White House.
Yeah. to be the first trans woman to get banned.
The first trans woman to be banned. What an honor. What an honor.
Yeah, I mean, talk about going viral for the wrong reasons. I mean,
Very wrong reasons. And from my knowledge, I think that that's the only reason why she's gone viral. I haven't heard of her since, and I didn't hear of her before that. So it's interesting how that is your 15 minutes of fame, showing your tits at the White House. Wow. Wow. It's very, very iconic.
I'm just like surprised that they invited. Like, what was the criteria to invite those activists? Like, I understand Jazz Jennings was there. She's obviously famous former trans kid. What was the criteria? Because Rose Matoya, I only found out about her after, you know, that drama, after her coming for Blaire White.
Right.
Before I didn't know. It seems like Blaire is making all those people irrelevant. But
Yep.
Even about Blossom, I didn't know that she did all those things up until that debate, right? So,
I did. I actually knew about Blossom because I watch Amala. And I watch Amala, and so she did that debate with Amala, and I saw that when it came out. That was the first time I found out about her. And boy, was I surprised. And so immediately when the whole thing with Blaire happened, I was like, okay, let me go ahead and put this clip together of what I saw of the individual. And she sure put out a lot about herself. I'm not going to say all of it was good. I'll be honest. I think that we can all say that. But what I can give her is that she is probably getting a lot of calls right now because she's very famous for basically being disliked. I would imagine I would imagine that most of those leftist organizations are calling her to, you know, speak at the HRC convention. So
I mean, it's been kind of the shtick with a lot of, you know, very left-wing trans activists. And I think maybe, even though this was unplanned, maybe we should talk about Dawn Mulvaney, because the more unliked she becomes, you know, I guess I'm gonna use she so I don't like have this video taken down. But personally, I'm having hard times because maybe I've seen the whole transition of Dylan more than with anyone else. And again, like with Dylan, it's just so over the top, his presentations, that I just see an actor. I don't see a trans woman. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. And again, like, but the more hate he gets, he just keeps on saying, oh, it's because I'm trans. You know, people just hate trans people. It's because I'm trans, I'm the minority. And that's why all the shit is happening to me. And a lot of far left corporations and organizations keep on sponsoring them and giving them more and more, you know, attention, more and more money, more and more opportunities. And also on the right side, the more hate watch people, the more people hate watch them and hate comment, it gives them more attention. Kind of like with Andrew Tate, with Pearl,
right.
You know, and sometimes it's called rage baiting. It's one way to make the social media thing work for you. You have a few options. You're either very likable or you're, you know, very hateful. People hate you to the point that they hate watch you, you know. Earlier YouTubers, do you remember Wendy's eating show? People would hate watch her. She was like a big Spanish girl that was eating a lot of food on camera. She was very sweet, but people would like hate watch her.
No.
Anyways,
No,
we can cut off this part. But, you know, some people like Andrew Tate, they just, you know, they get a lot of haters watching them too for things that they say, and that helps with algorithms, right?
Right.
So
right.
that's one way to get famous. You know, some people will have like severe disability that they'll you know, will get some attention, right?
Yeah.
So, you know,
that kind of, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say like Dylan's makeup artist, Gabriel something, the gay guy that's missing limbs, and you know who I'm talking about. The makeup artist, he does his makeup just by he doesn't have any limbs, Gabriel something.
Oh, I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. He has a video with Dylan when he did his makeup, and he's now trans as well, so he's disabled and trans.
Wow.
So you know, but I mean, I'm not saying those people don't deserve their platform because they're obviously in a unique situation, and I'm actually happy that Gabriel has the platforms that he does. But I'm saying that in a competitive environment that we're in right now, in terms of like being content creator on social media, there's almost very few avenues where you can get traction, right?
Right. Right.
what Dylan Blossom and Rose Montoya are doing is just kind of, victimhood.
Yeah, and that kind of goes into our conversation of like the de-influencer, the fact that now like back in the day, influencers actually used to influence, and now we have people like this who are again de-influence. They're influencing people to cut off limbs, to do surgeries. Blossom is on Jubilee talking about the fact that minors can give consent to cutting off their breasts, like just crazy radical thoughts that have been normalized. We can't ignore how radical thoughts like that are, because when you simply say, oh, I don't think that a 15-year-old should be able to get a mastectomy, they're going to call you a radical. They're going to say that you are very close-minded and that you're a bigot, and that as Blossom likes to say, you don't do the research. If we don't have the research,
Can you throw out some statistics?
There's an abundance of research. There's even trans activists who agree with exactly what I'm saying. Your hormones can change, right? Even she just spoke to the fact that her bone density did not change in going on hormones.
So if you can't throw out the statistics, we're not doing enough of the work.
Can you produce statistics about the bone density of biological men and how it changes upon being on hormones and whether or not it levels out to biological women?
I actually cannot, because when I would think of those statistics, I would think it was BS.
Like she says, if we don't have the research, then how can we really go off of that? Well, we do have the research. We have the research on quite a bit about detransitioners and how that goes for people. And her kind of influencing and Dylan's kind of influencing, talking about every single day being, your 17th, 100th day of girlhood, how that does negatively impact people, especially with the fact that for the most part, one of the biggest the audience on TikTok is young people and teenagers. And that is a problem, because for the most part, and I have it highlighted, for the most part, YouTubers either end up becoming one of two things. They either end up, at least the trans YouTuber, they either end up, or I guess I should say, we really should be calling it trans influencer, because there's a lot of people on different platforms that we're talking about. But at least when it comes to the trans influencer, for most of them, they either end up going through the right-wing political sphere, where there are people like Blaire who end up becoming successful because of the fact that they go against those people, or the very radical leftist thought of people like Dylan, who 3 days ago were not trans and now they are trans, and how that does affect the people that they are followed by. Because I would imagine that, who was it that also announced the other day that they were doing a day of, that they were also going to be, there was a big influencer that announced the other day that they were going to be doing a countdown like Dylan, and it was their whatever day of girlhood. It is influencing people. And again, I would call it a de-influence. They're de-influencers, because I wouldn't call it a good thing,
But I think in our mind, because I also like call myself sometimes the influencer, because I'm literally showing people what not to do,
Right.
But in their mind, they're actual influencers. These things are doing good. I've confronted one of those influencers on Jubilee Debate, my Jubilee Debate. It was Samantha Lex, and I said, like, she was the biggest, she had the biggest platform out of people who appeared on that debate, especially on YouTube sphere. And I was like, how do you feel about the fact that, you have possibly influenced a lot of people into body modifications that they may come to regret? And she was like, oh, I was just sharing my truths, and whatever decisions they made between them and their doctors. What do you think? Do you think these trans influencers have influenced people over the years to transition, or have they simply shared their stories and helped other people to find themselves and, or shows them?
Oh, absolutely. There is influence there. And it's as simple as not just talking about your transition, but it's as simple as getting a camera and taking it into the office of your doctor to talk about the changes that you're making. On one hand, it can simply just be said people are just trying to document their stories. I can tell you for a fact that people, at the end of the day, they're going to want to document their stories. And I understand that, and I would like people to, maybe that's a personal video that you can make. But for the most part, when you are recording that, and again, the biggest populace that is on TikTok, on YouTube, I was one of them, I can tell you, is teenagers and people that are underage. Again, when you're taking the camera into the doctor's office, a point can be made about the fact that it goes past just talking about your experience in front of a camera, and it goes into telling people that you went to this specific doctor. And now that doctor has a lot of people, telling them, I'm interested, I'm this, I'm that. And that's a problem.
Yes, for sure. And I'm sure some of those influencers got in their plastic surgeries for free or for a discount when you signal boost a certain surgeon to a huge audience of people that are also aspiring to look like you. Hello.
Right.
Plus, I mean, after you got a free surgery or a discount surgery, are you gonna really be real about the results?
Right.
You know? I mean, it's different when you get a free Prada bag and a Prada bag that you paid for. Of course, you're gonna be like, wow, I got this for free, this is amazing, you know?
Right.
Whereas
You're going to have
be
a lot
more
of nicer
critical.
things to say about it, even if it's
Right.
ugly, of course.
Yeah, you're gonna have less negative things to say if you got it for free, right? You're not gonna complain as much about it, versus you're gonna be more critical if this bag was worth it when you paid thousands of dollars for it, right?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, the sad part with that is that when we're talking about the medical transition of individuals, the sad part about that conversation is that you can sell a Prada bag that was expensive. You can sell that bag, but you can't undo certain things. You know what I mean? And that's kind of where we talk about them being de-influencers, because there's something to say about somebody. And like you said, I do want to make the differentiation between, because I do know that you call yourself a de-influencer, but I want to make the differentiation between you are purposely a de-influencer. You are trying to teach people, hey, I made these mistakes, don't follow my footsteps, and you're being open about your life so that people don't make those mistakes. But these people, like you said, they actually think that they are influencers. And the problem with that is, who is going to tell them that they're not?
I was gonna say, back to your point about Prada bags that you can resell on one of the websites like Poshmark or is it real, whatever,
Yep.
not sponsored. I don't use those, but I see the advertisements for those websites.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about. You
I
cannot
do.
get back your functional genitals, and I believe a lot of post-op trans women definitely are not honest about their results because of sunk cost fallacy. It's, when you put a lot of effort and money into something, in your mind you can never admit it's just too big of a jump to backtrack because so much went into it, and it's kind of irreversible, and
Right.
this cost is so big that you kind of have to, you're not getting back whatever you put into this, so you kind of
Absolutely.
have to leave a delusion, or just at least keep up the delusion for the public so you don't look stupid and foolish. I don't envy a lot of huge influencers who have influence. They must know that they influence like at least dozens, if not hundreds and thousands of people across the world to do these things to themselves. Imagine the weight of that one day to be like, oh shit, like I should have never done this. I should never wrote about this. I mean, the weight of that, like I'm so glad I was not a trans influencer ever. Like I mentioned that multiple times. I'm really glad I never, on my trans days, I never posted videos talking how amazing the transition was, because for me it actually wasn't. It was very short-lived trans joy initially that wore off pretty quickly. So yeah, again, it's like that Prada bag situation where you can't get rid of that. You can't resell
And
it.
how do you personally feel as a person who, you haven't made, obviously it's a different story now because you are using the fact that you detransitioned, you are talking about that often. So it's a little different now. But how do you feel about those individuals that take a process as personal as transitioning and then putting it on camera for other people to see? How do you feel about that as a person who, because from what I've heard it described as, gender dysphoria is a very intense, intimate experience that you go through as a person. How do you see those people who basically in the height of their transition were putting a camera in their face and recording it for other people to see? What do you think about people like that?
I think the earlier ones, the earlier trans influencers, the OG ones, I don't think they had enough information, because as we learned from Jubilee episode, back to your point, I just wanted to correct, there is not that many research studies on detransitioners specifically, and there isn't even good long-term studies on trans people, and that was brought up during Jubilee. And this is why this episode was so important, because the other side pretty much Shane admitted that all this experimental, but he drew parallel with HIV medications among gay community. He was like, well, yes, some people suffered initially due to all the side effects from horrible HIV medications.
To your point about gaining research, how do you expect the medical community to gain access to research if we're just preventing these folks to actually go through any of the processes to learn the scientific method of what is happening? Just like it with AZT drugs, where we learned that that was actually harming us, and now we have things like Biktarvy.
It is so infuriating to me to bring up the whole Biktarvy and the way that Shane basically said, oh, well, I mean, why shouldn't we let these people, these children, fuck up their lives so we can learn from the research? And compared it to the deaths of thousands and thousands of gay men who had to die for the research of medication that they were literally dying to receive. How disgusting is it to basically say, oh, well, people sometimes have to die for us to gain research? That's literally, again, the same argument, because the juxtapositions are fucking crazy. That is literally the same fucking argument that the Nazi doctors who taught us all about hypothermia and all of those things that we learned. Yeah, people actually died. We learned, but they died. Very, very cruel, cruel deaths. Now, when we test for certain medications, certain things, there are ways for them to test them in labs, their effectiveness, without killing people. That's fucking ridiculous, what this person just said. I think their name is Shane. Ridiculous.
But hey, we had to do that to find out what works and what doesn't. So that's why, yeah, sure, let 16-year-olds remove their breasts. Sure, sterilize children, while he's sitting there and saying how he's not even taking testosterone because he's trying to get pregnant. Obviously, you're not dysphoric enough if you're going to use your female functions to have a child. Like, shut up. Honestly, he was just kind of unspoken villain of that episode that a lot of people are actually not pointing out how dangerous Shane is. Like, they're all kind of going after Blossom because, yeah, she's unlikable, loudmouth, looks busted look. Busted looking wig. I'm not calling Blossom ugly, just to clarify that, because it's gonna be twisted. I'm saying that Blossom just has bad wardrobe and bad wigs, and again, it's just something that's fixable. It just bothers me as somebody who would like to think that I serve sometimes certain fashion moments. Talking about that, I feel like Alexander's look, people said, oh, clown, whatever, but I think Alexander at least served some fashion. I liked his look. That's something I would have worn.
I will disagree with you on that one. I think that the yellow beret was a little much for me. I think that it would be a little much for people that lived in Paris as well. It wasn't really for me. What I will say was that the dress was a little creative, so I'll give you that. But I don't know that I would adopt that look for myself.
He took a
What I
risk.
will say, huh?
He took a risk, it's like Sync Project Runway. At least he took a risk among
Quite the big one. It was quite the big one. I don't know if it paid off. I mean, we will agree to disagree. But at least with him, I agree with you, and I think we briefly talked about this. I talked about this in my reaction video that I did to that debate. But I personally was disgusted by seeing somebody take the comparison of individuals who took experimental HIV medication, who actually died for that medication. There was individuals who were on deathbeds who were waiting for that medication to be given to them. And to make the comparison that we should take children as our guinea pigs is so dangerous, because people like him have a platform, and people like him have the opportunity to then go on another podcast with Blossom, which they did, and talk about the fact that they're the winners of that debate, when we all know that they were not, especially the person who is advocating for trans children to be some sort of like guinea pigs for surgeries. It's crazy. And I will say, you are correct in the sense that there is not a lot of studies on detransitioners, but in my videos, I've talked about studies that have come out to specifically talk about the fact that the suicide rate in detransitioners actually goes up. Actually, the suicide rate goes up for individuals who have transitioned, and they, at least for now, from the minimal research of the few years that we've had for those individuals, I'm sure that will change. They have shown that most of those individuals end up having extensive mental health issues, whether it be depression, suicidal thoughts, anxiety problems. A lot of them end up having paranoia issues. So at least with that, there is some studies we can point to,
Yeah.
whether even if they're like college studies and things like that.
Yeah, things are not looking good for the trans community because once you cut off all the body parts you could have and your mental health issues have been left untreated and you're still not feeling better, then reality hits you like, oh shit, now I'm also physically disabled, right?
Right.
Due to hormones and all that. And like you mentioned, people actually die from those experimental HIV medication. Guess what? People have died over the years. Trans women have died and committed, some of them self-cancellation, some of them, due to being forced into sex work to pay for surgeries they thought was medically necessary. All this, so many lives have been lost and never accounted for. And in fact, I'll send you a video that you can include in this one, where a trans woman said how like a few friends of hers committed suicide after the bottom surgeries. They weren't included in any statistics.
See, I did a lot of surgeries to myself. I changed everything.
You had
no,
sex changed and everything?
I still have it. I refuse to get that off. Because I'm scared. I had the money 3 times, in front of me, for the sex change. I had $10,000 in front of me 3 times. But I don't want it now. Before it was something that I had to have it. But I've seen a lot of my girlfriends die after they get the sex change. They go crazy, so I don't want it. I'm happy like this.
Why would they go crazy though?
Why? Because they can't come, and when you're used to selling your ass and your dick in plain English, and then when somebody cuts it off, it makes a big difference. Because most of these guys want to get fucked by us. So when you get a pussy, there's no fucking no man, and that frustration, freaks you out. I had 3 girlfriends in the past 2.5 years that, killed themselves after they get a pussy.
Wow.
And my best friend, just recently, she hanged herself over a gas pipe after she got the pussy. And I watched her go through the pussy, get everything, and she was gorgeous as I am. And I said, no way, I won't destroy myself like that.
Why, they can't reach a climax no more?
No, you don't feel nothing. It's a dry hole.
Really?
They say they feel it. But you see, I've been around too many girls and I can tell they don't feel nothing. I've seen it with my own eyes.
A lot of this is experimental. I don't know how my future looks with everything that's been done to me, both on mental and physical level. This is serious shit,
It is.
That New Zealand woman that I just reacted to her video, she said it's end of life for her because now she can't work. Work is important for people's mental health. And once you're disabled, such as in her case, she decorates homes, before they get sold. So she can't lift up stuff anymore because of the hernia. And
Wow. Yeah, no, it's wild. And from what you describe and from what most people describe, the detransition process, a lot of it is mental. A lot of it is coming to the realization that you are not trans. A lot of it is mental because for a lot of people, unfortunately, once you do decide to medicalize yourself and you do make that decision, you do sign on the dotted line, it's like once you sign those medical papers, all of your choices, everything that you could have not consented to is signed away because you signed a piece of paper that basically says that you're not going to sue people. And the crazy part about that is that how can you enforce a contract like that when you're not actually telling people all of the information?
that's the thing though, like how can they know all the possibilities and probabilities of things going wrong when there isn't enough research done on the surgeries, which Shane admitted to, he's, that's why it's a big breakthrough because the other side didn't have any good evidence. They were only just saying, oh, well, if I had the surgery at 16, I wouldn't have to buy it. Really? But if you were put on puberty blockers, you wouldn't be able to have children right now that you're trying to have.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just hypocrisy. I don't know. I feel like something as experimental and drastic as this has to be really studied hard before being mass marketed through social
Right.
media influencers. And it's kind of scary is that a lot of this influencers did the selling for those unethical surgeons. They did, and I'm sure a lot of them, yeah, some of them might have gotten like free nose job here and there. I doubt that any of them got a bottom surgery for free, you know. So
Yeah, and that kind of talks about people like Gigi, people like Gigi, I remember back when she was first starting out, how she would post her videos of her in the surgery office. And
yeah.
so that right there is definitely putting a lot of eyes on yourself and a lot of eyes on your transition. You're putting eyes on yourself for being transgender. And that I'm definitely sure plays into a lot of other people's decision to be trans because, to my knowledge, she was the first mass marketed trans YouTuber. She was invited to everything. She was the first trans YouTuber that got all of the PR. She was the first trans YouTuber who broke out into other YouTube scenes. She would make videos with Shane Dawson, with Trisha. She was one of the first trans YouTubers to actually get a little bit of grounding and standpoint in her career. And I can't say to you that those videos that she posted in the doctor's office didn't influence at least one or two people. So
100%.
it's definitely it's an interesting conversation because I don't know how do you not, and you can definitely add on to this, how can you not, maybe without saying it online, have some sort of guilt for that?
There's a lot of narcissism in trans community. It's all about, you know, in a way, to be trans, you kind of, you know, you're like, okay, these are my pronouns, this is what I am, and then everyone around me has to adjust to this. It is a little bit narcissistic. We see it a lot more in non-binary
Okay.
community, but it's also social media. A lot of those people, they do have, you know, that specific narcissistic personality. Like, oh my God, I have full. I'm not saying everyone is like this. There's absolutely down to earth YouTubers that are just, you know, they're sweet people that'll just like casual turn on the camera and do something casual and get a lot of likes and followers. But a lot of these people, even if they were narcissistic initially, like they'll definitely fall down that path. Like we talked earlier about what fame does to people. I
Right.
think that talk about privilege. I mean, Gigi Gorgeous is one of a few privileged ones I know. From what I know, she did grow up in like upper middle class Canadian family, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that was very supportive of, you know, her initial gay identity and then further like transitioning.
Yep.
So she did have resources and all that, and I think I don't think she feels guilty. I think at the end of the day, she won, you know, as we talked earlier. I definitely want to comment on those videos in the doctor's office because one of the videos definitely influenced me because she did go to Dr. Spiegel. I don't remember, Jeffrey Spiegel. He is used to be a very famous facial feminization surgeon in Massachusetts, and I live in Massachusetts. And I remember after seeing that video, I did go to have surgery with him possibly. You know, I went for a consult and that alone was $250 like just to talk
Wow.
to him. Yes, back in the days that was so expensive, right? And then the bills that he offered like was so expensive that I couldn't afford it at the time. You know,
I can
and
imagine.
I'm not doing that simply because it was so expensive, but for sure she kind of promoted him, even influenced me to go. And I felt ugly walking out of his office, you know, because it is kind of demeaning when you pay somebody $250 to tell you that pretty much you're ugly and he can fix you for like $50,000.
The legend, Dr. Spiegel.
Make you
Wow.
beautiful. Yeah, I mean, pretty much that's what
Yeah,
happened.
I mean, yeah, I can understand why that would be at least some sort of very hurtful reality check, at least about your own
Yeah.
personal, you know, the way that you personally looked, especially I'm assuming at that point probably going through a lot of gender dysphoria
No,
and
actually,
needing the
at
help.
that point, I already had my facial feminization surgery and I was still dysphoric. That's the funny part. Like, my dysphoria, what I thought was gender dysphoria, never went away. That's like, I was like Gigi, I was like, watching her video, I was like, okay, I don't feel comfortable still. Maybe I should get more facial feminization.
I
And thank God
see.
I didn't,
Okay.
you know? I
I
was like,
see.
Yeah, so that's the funny part. I looked the way I look pretty much. Granted, maybe I was lighter. I'm a few pounds heavier than I was back then, but I already had my facial feminization surgery, so it was just more dysphoria. I became more dysphoric through my transition. I felt worse off about my body, and this is, now I'm learning to love my body because I have to survive, but honestly, it never cured my discomfort because it was all body dysmorphia. And if you look at Gigi, we talked earlier, she kept on getting more and more plastic surgeries over the
Right.
years. It's very evident. It's very evident.
Right. And it basically, I mean, just from that, just from what you described, just from that one video, it sounds like she at least influenced you to have a consultation because you had already had your feminization surgery for your face.
Yeah.
And so she had pushed you to at least have a consultation with this person. You saw how maybe she ended up looking and you were like, oh, well, maybe I can do that too. And even then, when you did that, it didn't give you the answers that you were searching for. So absolutely she influenced. I mean, if you right now, you happen to be one person that was influenced by Gigi Gorgeous, I mean, hundreds of other people could have possibly been influenced by her. And I also, I think we should be clear about this. We're not trying to pick on her and focus just on her. But I mean, it's not our fault that she's one of the few people who took a camera to the doctor's office. She's just one of those people. So it's easy to kind of talk about her influence because she did.
Yeah, but she influenced a bunch of other influencers to do the same thing, right?
Mhm.
They started documented how big their ass has grown, how
Yeah.
like their breast augmentation surgery, FFS surgeries. If you look at Nikita's FFS, if you look at other creators that we will be both bringing up in this series, that all have gotten like a lot of views on those videos, and every time any of them tried to make a comeback, anything that was not trans related was not getting that much views. For the
Right.
most of them, it was a flop video, right?
Right.
And those standard videos, oh, he didn't know I was trans, like, those standard trans videos.
Right.
3 years HRT update. I don't know, telling my data I'm trans.
Yeah, most of them were centered around being transgender and like kind of like a lot of them were like trans clickbait, like clickbait videos. Nikita did a video about her boyfriend and then ended up being that guy was hired by somebody by her to pretend to be her boyfriend allegedly.
Yeah,
And
any
that's a
video with
little
a trans
wild.
woman and a boyfriend show off always gets a lot of views because the whole public is curious, like what kind of man date trans woman, and they love pointing it out that it's gay, so
Right.
they'll go and write those comments, and that creates engagement, right? So people
Right.
will come and be like, oh, do you know gay marriages are actually legal in the state? So right, things like
Oh my
that, which is
God.
funny sometimes.
Oh my
I saw
God.
one video like that where it was like New Mexico couple, and it was a trans woman and just a man, and somebody was like, you guys know gay marriages are legal in New Mexico, right?